For 8 years, I believed I was keeping a promise to my dying sister. Every month I sent her husband money, thinking it was helping my niece grow up safe. By the time it passed $80,000, I thought I was doing the right thing. Then, one Friday night, I walked into their house unannounced and realized the refrigerator was almost empty. Half the furniture was gone, and my niece was quietly standing in the doorway watching everything disappear. That was the moment I understood the money I sent was never protecting her. My name is Leora Kincaid, and the night I decided to follow where that money really went changed my niece's life and destroyed the lie her father had been hiding for years. Chapter 1. The Promise I Made to My Sister. I still remember the exact way my sister looked at me the last time we spoke without machines humming between us. It was early spring in 2016, and the rain outside St. Mary's Hospital in Madison had turned the parking lot into a dull gray mirror. I had rushed there straight from work, still wearing my North Lake Insurance Analytics badge on a blue lanyard that swung against my coat as I walked down the hallway. Naomi was never someone who scared easily. She had spent 15 years as a pediatric nurse. Sick children, exhausted parents, long night shifts. She handled all of it with a calm strength that made other people feel steadier just by standing next to her. But that afternoon, she looked different. The room was quiet, except for the slow rhythm of the heart monitor beside her bed. Sunlight filtered through the blinds and stretched thin lines of light across the blanket covering her legs. Her skin looked pale, almost fragile. Still, when she saw me step inside, she managed a small smile. "You made it." "Of course I did." I pulled a chair close to the bed and took her hand. Her fingers were cold, but she squeezed mine with surprising strength. Wade stood near the window, staring down at the parking lot. He had not shaved in days. His shoulders were hunched in a way I had never seen before. Naomi looked from him back to me. "Leora, I need you to promise me something." "You are going to be fine," I said quickly. "We will talk about this later." Her eyes stayed fixed on mine. "Promise me you will watch out for Bria." The words landed softly, but they carried weight that made my chest tighten. Bria was 2 years old then, a little girl with thick brown curls who dragged a stuffed rabbit everywhere she went. I had been babysitting since the day she was born. In many ways, she already felt like a second daughter in my life. "You know I will," I said. "You do not even have to ask." Naomi shook her head slightly. "I mean really watch out for her. If something ever feels wrong, if anything ever seems off." She paused, taking a slow breath. "Just make sure she is never forgotten." I tightened my grip on her hand. "I promise." Wade stepped closer then, his voice rough. "Naomi, you know I would never let anything happen to our daughter." Naomi looked at him and nodded softly. "I know." 2 days later, Naomi was gone. I remember standing outside the hospital after signing paperwork, the cold air hitting my face as if the world had suddenly grown unfamiliar. Wade held Bria in the parking lot while she played with the zipper on his jacket, completely unaware that her life had just changed forever. The months after the funeral blurred together. I lived in Madison, in a small 2-bedroom house I had bought a few years earlier after landing my job as a data analyst at North Lake Insurance Analytics. My work involved numbers and risk patterns, things that followed logic. Life outside spreadsheets rarely did. Wade stayed in the house he had shared with Naomi in Middleton, about 35 minutes west of Madison. During the first year, I drove out almost every weekend. Sometimes I brought groceries, sometimes toys for Bria. Sometimes I just sat on the living room floor while she colored pictures at the coffee table. She loved drawing animals, even though none of them looked quite right. The cat she tried to sketch usually ended up with 6 legs and enormous ears. She would laugh whenever I tried to guess what it was supposed to be. Wade always seemed grateful that I stayed involved. He worked long hours as an HVAC technician, and the schedule could be brutal. In early 2017, I started sending him money. At first, it was occasional. $200 one month, $400 the next. Eventually, it became consistent. $750 every month. I never asked for a specific amount. I simply chose a number that felt meaningful but manageable for me. Whenever I visited, the house seemed normal. The kitchen smelled like coffee or pasta sauce. The living room stayed tidy. Bria always had clean clothes and a backpack filled with crayons and school papers. Each time I transferred money, Wade would thank me. "You have no idea how much this helps," he told me once while leaning against the kitchen counter. "Naomi would be glad Bria still has you." Hearing that made the promise I made in the hospital feel real. As Bria grew older, my visits settled into a rhythm. Usually the first Saturday of each month. I would drive out to Middleton with groceries or sometimes a small gift. A few times I suggested dropping by after school to surprise her. Wade always had a reason it wouldn't work. "She has a lot of homework tonight. She isn't feeling great today. I'm fixing something in the house." Every explanation sounded reasonable, and I never wanted to cross the line between supportive aunt and intrusive relative. For the first couple of years, Wade's mother Lorraine also appeared occasionally. She lived across town and helped with Bria from time to time. "He works harder than people realize," Lorraine told me while washing dishes. "Being a widower with a little girl is not easy." Those words stayed with me. By 2021, Wade mentioned that HVAC work had slowed down. Contracts were inconsistent and some companies were cutting hours. When he told me this over the phone one evening, I felt the familiar pull of responsibility. I quietly increased the financial support that year. Around 2022, Wade mentioned a woman named Kendra. "Just someone I met through work," he said casually. "She sells cars over in Madison." He shrugged when he said it, like it wasn't important. I didn't question it. Wade had been alone for years, and companionship seemed normal. Through all those years, I believed I was honoring Naomi's request. I watched Bria grow into a thoughtful fourth grader who loved drawing animals and collecting smooth stones from the backyard. Every time I left after a visit, she would hug me tightly and ask when I would come back. Then, toward the end of 2024, small things began to change. At first, the shift was subtle. Bria seemed quieter during my visits. Her stories about school became shorter. Wade started ending our afternoons earlier than usual. "She has a big test Monday," he said once while glancing at the clock. Another time, he said she hadn't slept well and needed rest. I told myself, kids change as they grow older. Then one afternoon, I opened my email during a break at work and saw a message from someone named Maribel Santos. The subject line simply said, "Bria Holt." Maribel explained she was Bria's teacher at Lakeview Elementary in Middleton. Her email was polite and careful. She wrote that Bria had come to school several times recently without lunch. I stared at the screen longer than I expected. After replying to thank her, I called Wade that evening. He answered quickly. "Hey, Leora. I mentioned the email." He sounded mildly puzzled. "Really? That's strange. Bria probably just forgot it. Kids do that sometimes." His voice carried an easy tone that suggested the problem was small. I told him I would bring extra groceries next time I visited. "No need," he said quickly. "Everything is fine here." After we hung up, I sat alone in my kitchen listening to the quiet hum of the refrigerator. Something about the conversation felt slightly off, like a detail that didn't quite fit. The following Friday, I finished work early. The sky above Madison had already turned violet when I grabbed my keys. I didn't call Wade. Instead, I drove west toward Middleton. The highway stretched quietly ahead of me. When I reached his street, the neighborhood lights were glowing through the trees. I parked in front of the house and walked up the driveway. The porch light was on. I knocked. A moment later, the door opened and Bria looked up at me with wide eyes. "Aunt Leora!" She stepped aside to let me in. As soon as I crossed the threshold, something felt wrong. For a second, I couldn't place it. Then I realized the living room looked bigger than before. The tall wooden cabinet Naomi loved was gone. The corner where it had stood for years was empty, leaving only a pale square on the carpet. I slowly turned, taking in the rest of the room. Other things were missing too. Chapter 2. The House That Didn't Make Sense. My eyes moved slowly across the living room while I tried not to let my confusion show. The space felt strangely hollow. The couch was still there, the coffee table too. but several things that had always been part of the room were missing. The tall wooden cabinet Naomi loved had stood in the corner for years. She used to keep photo albums inside it. I remembered helping her move it into that exact spot when Bria was still a baby. Now the corner was empty. I forced a small smile and looked down at Bria. "Hey kiddo, were you expecting me tonight?" She shook her head and pushed a curl away from her eyes. "Dad said he had to run out for a bit." "Run out where?" "Store, I think." I stepped further into the house. The air felt oddly thin, like the place had been slowly emptied without anyone noticing. "You want to show me your latest drawing?" I asked. Her face brightened a little. "Yeah." She pulled a sheet of paper from the coffee table and handed it to me. The drawing looked like a dog with oversized ears and a crooked tail. "That dog looks very serious," I said. She laughed softly. "It is supposed to be a wolf." I nodded as if it made perfect sense. While she colored the edges with a purple crayon, my eyes drifted toward the kitchen down the hallway. Something else felt wrong. "You hungry?" I asked. She shrugged. "A little." "Let me check what you have in the kitchen." I walked down the hallway and flipped on the light. When I opened the refrigerator door, a small knot formed in my stomach. There was almost nothing inside. A half-empty carton of milk sat on the middle shelf. A bottle of ketchup leaned against the door. On the bottom shelf, there was a plastic container with what looked like leftover noodles. I stood there longer than necessary. Maybe Wade had gone grocery shopping and had not returned yet. That was the logical explanation. Still, I checked the freezer. 2 frozen burritos. Nothing else. The pantry was not much better. A few instant noodle cups, a single can of soup, and a nearly empty bag of cereal. I closed the cabinet slowly. Behind me, I heard footsteps. Bria stood in the doorway. "Dad said we are going shopping tomorrow." Her voice sounded casual, but the words felt rehearsed. "Tomorrow, huh?" She nodded. "Did you eat dinner already?" "Yeah." "What did you have?" She looked down. "Noodles." I did not push further. Instead, I grabbed the milk. "Let me make you some cereal anyway." She sat at the kitchen table while I poured cereal into a bowl. She ate quietly, swinging her feet under the chair, while I leaned against the counter. I kept thinking about the email from her teacher, several times without lunch. When Bria finished eating, she rinsed the bowl and set it in the sink. "Thank you." "You're welcome." We returned to the living room and sat together while she colored. The house stayed quiet until headlights swept across the front window. "Dad is back," she said. The front door opened and Wade stepped inside, carrying a small convenience store bag. He froze when he saw me. "Leora!" "Hey!" His voice held surprise, but not warmth. "I was in the area," I said. "Thought I would stop by." "You could have called." "I wanted to surprise Bria." Bria held up her drawing. "Look what I made." Wade gave it a quick glance. "Nice." Then his attention returned to me. "Everything okay?" "I got an email from her teacher earlier. Just wanted to check in." "About lunch?" I nodded. He waved a hand. "She just forgets sometimes. Kids do that." Her teacher said it has happened a few times. Wade leaned against the wall. Maybe the school should remind them to grab their lunchboxes. The irritation in his voice surprised me. "I'm not blaming you," I said calmly. "I just wanted to make sure she had food." His eyes flicked toward the kitchen. "There's food here." I did not mention the refrigerator. The room fell quiet. Then Wade rubbed his face. "Look, Leora, I know you mean well, but you do not need to check up on everything." I felt the words land harder than he probably intended. "I'm not checking up. I just care about her." "Yeah," he said. "I know." Bria stood up from the coffee table. "I'm going to my room." She disappeared down the hallway before either of us said anything else. Wade watched her go, then looked back at me. "You know this is still my house, right?" "Of course." "Then trust that I can take care of my own kid." The sentence hung in the air. I nodded slowly. "I do trust you. I just wanted to talk." He lifted the convenience store bag slightly. I grabbed some snacks on the way home. Everything is fine. Inside the bag, I could see 2 candy bars and a bag of chips. A few minutes later, I picked up my purse. "I should head back to Madison." "Yeah," Wade said. Before leaving, I glanced down the hallway. Bria stood there quietly, half hidden by the wall. "Good night, kiddo." "Good night, Aunt Leora." The drive back to Madison felt longer than usual. The next morning, the uneasy feeling had not gone away. By mid-morning, I found myself driving back toward Middleton again. Lakeview Elementary sat at the edge of a quiet neighborhood, lined with maple trees. Children ran across the playgrounds while teachers watched from folding chairs. Inside the office, I introduced myself and asked to see Maribel Santos. A few minutes later, a woman in her 30s with warm eyes stepped into the hallway. "You must be Leora." She led me into a small conference room. "I really appreciate you coming," she said. "I didn't want to alarm anyone, but I thought you should know what has been happening." "How has Bria been doing?" "Academically, she is doing well. She is very bright. But the past few months, she seemed more tired than usual." "And the lunches?" "Yes." She spoke gently. "It started early in the fall. At first, I assumed she forgot, but it kept happening." "Did you talk to Wade?" "Several times. I left messages and emails, but I never received a response." A cold weight settled in my stomach. Sometimes Bria says she's not hungry, but children rarely skip lunch willingly. After thanking her, I watched the playground through the window. Bria was drawing shapes in the gravel with a stick, while other kids ran past her. On the way back to Wade Street, I slowed near the mailbox cluster. Terrence Doyle stood watering plants near the sidewalk. Naomi used to say he knew everything that happened on the block. "Morning, Terrence." He squinted before recognizing me. "Leora, been a while." We talked for a minute before he glanced toward Wade's house. "You still helping your niece?" "Of course." "Good kid." He hesitated. "Your brother-in-law keeps odd hours lately." "What do you mean?" "Lights on late, cars coming and going." "Maybe work?" "Maybe." He looked down the street. "Though usually I see him leave most evenings, sometimes he doesn't come back until morning." My fingers tightened slightly on the steering wheel. "Does Bria stay here alone?" "Hard to say," he replied, "though I see a young woman visit sometimes. Drives a silver sedan." "Kendra." Terrence nodded. "That sounds right." Later that evening, I returned to Wade's house again. The conversation between us quickly turned tense. "You're blowing this out of proportion," Wade said. "I'm asking simple questions. You're not her mother." "I know that." Bria stood up from the coffee table and her voice dropped to a whisper. "Sometimes Dad goes out all night." The words settled heavily in the room. When I finally walked toward the door, I glanced once more toward the empty corner of the living room. The wooden cabinet Naomi loved was still gone. Chapter 3. Following the money. Something about that empty corner followed me all the way back to Madison. The drive home felt unusually quiet. Traffic lights blurred past the windshield while the same thought kept circling in my mind. Over the past 8 years, I had trusted Wade completely. I had never once asked how the money I sent was being used. At the time, it felt unnecessary. He was Bria's father. The money was meant to help. Now, the memory of that empty refrigerator and missing furniture refused to leave my head. When I got home that night, I opened my laptop at the kitchen table. My bank account history loaded slowly across the screen. I began scrolling through the transfers. $750 every month after month, year after year. I leaned back in my chair and started doing the math in my head. The numbers stacked quietly across the screen until the total crossed $60,000. The realization landed with a dull weight in my chest. I had never once asked where it went. At first, I tried to tell myself it did not matter. Raising a child was expensive. School supplies, groceries, utilities. There were endless things money could disappear into. Still, something felt wrong. I began opening individual transfers, looking at the patterns. Several of the deposits had been withdrawn from Wade's account the same day they arrived. Some were gone within hours. That alone was not proof of anything, but it made me uneasy. The next morning, during my lunch break, I called Alyssa Park. Alyssa and I had known each other since college. She worked as a financial analyst at a regional bank in Madison and had a mind that noticed details most people missed. She answered on the second ring. "Hey, stranger, what is going on?" "I need a favor." Her tone changed slightly. "That sounds serious." I hesitated for a moment. "I have been sending money to someone for years. I just want to understand where it might be going." Alyssa was quiet for a second. "You think something is wrong?" "I do not know yet." She sighed softly. "Send me what you have." That evening, I forwarded several transaction records to her. 2 days later, she called me back. "You were right to look into this." I sat up straight at the kitchen table. "What did you find?" "Several of the transfers you sent were followed by payments to a dealership account." "A dealership?" "Yeah, looks like a regional auto group. The charges are not direct purchases, but service payments and internal financing." I frowned. "Wade does not sell cars." "No, but someone else might." She paused. "Do you know anyone named Kendra?" The name made my stomach tighten. "I've heard it." Alyssa continued typing on her end. "Because a few of these payments line up with activity linked to a salesperson commission account. It looks like money connected to vehicle transactions." I stared at the wall across my kitchen. That does not make sense. It might if someone close to him works there. After we hung up, I opened my laptop again. This time, I searched the name Kendra Vale. It took less than a minute. Her profile appeared on several social media sites. In the photos, she looked confident and polished, standing beside cars in a dealership showroom somewhere in Madison. One image showed her leaning against a silver sedan with a wide smile. Another showed her sitting at a rooftop restaurant holding a glass of wine. I kept scrolling. Vacation photos from Arizona, expensive dinners, shopping bags. The timestamps caught my attention. Several posts had been uploaded within hours of transfers I had sent to Wade. I closed the laptop slowly. Maybe it was coincidence. Maybe not. The next clue appeared unexpectedly. 2 days later, I drove back to Middleton in the late afternoon. As I turned onto Wade Street, I saw something unusual in front of the house. A small moving truck sat in the driveway. The back door of the truck was open. A woman stood near the entrance carrying a box. Even from a distance, I recognized her from the photos. Kendra Vale. She stepped down from the truck and walked toward the front yard while Wade held the door open. They were laughing about something. I slowed the car and parked across the street. Kendra carried another box out of the house. Behind them, the front door was still open. Inside the doorway, I could see Bria standing quietly in the hallway. She was watching the furniture leave. Chapter 4. The plan my sister left behind. I sat in the car for several seconds before opening the door. The scene in front of the house felt unreal. The small moving truck was still idling in the driveway. Its back door hung open, while Wade stood near the ramp talking with Kendra. Kendra carried another box down the front steps and placed it inside the truck. She brushed her hair behind her ear and laughed at something Wade said. Inside the doorway, Bria stood quietly, her small figure framed by the dim hallway behind her. She was not crying. She was not speaking. She was just watching. I stepped out of the car and walked across the street. Gravel crunched under my shoes as I reached the driveway. Wade noticed me first. His expression changed immediately. "Leora!" Kendra turned to look at me, curiosity flickering across her face. "What is going on here?" I asked. Wade wiped his hands on his jeans and walked toward me. "We are moving some stuff." I looked at the truck. "I can see that." Kendra picked up another small box but stayed close enough to listen. I glanced toward the house. "Where is Bria going to live?" Wade exhaled slowly, like he had expected the question. "We're moving in together." He gestured casually toward Kendra, closer to Madison. The words hung in the air. "And Bria?" I asked. Wade shrugged. She will come with us." The casual tone in his voice made something inside my chest tighten. "You are pulling her out of her school. We'll find another one." His voice carried the calm certainty of someone who believed the decision had already been made. Kendra stepped closer to the truck, but kept watching us. I lowered my voice. "Wade, you cannot just move her without thinking about what is best for her." His expression hardened. "I am her father. I decide what is best." For a moment, neither of us spoke. Behind him, I saw Bria still standing in the hallway. She had not moved. I walked toward the house. "Hi, kiddo." She looked up at me with tired eyes. "Hi, Aunt Leora." I crouched slightly so we were closer to eye level. "How are you doing?" She hesitated. "Okay." Her voice was small. Behind me, Wade called out, "Bria, go pack the rest of your room." She turned slowly and disappeared down the hallway. I stood up and faced him again. "When are you planning to move?" "Soon." "How soon?" "This week." The answer hit harder than I expected. "You are serious?" He crossed his arms. "Yes." Kendra climbed into the back of the truck to rearrange boxes. I looked at Wade carefully. "You did not even tell me." He gave a short laugh. "I didn't realize I needed permission." The conversation was going nowhere. I looked past him into the house again. The rooms already felt half empty. "I will talk to you later," I said quietly. He shrugged. "Suit yourself." I walked back to my car, feeling the weight of Naomi's promise pressing harder than ever. The drive back to Madison felt different from the others. The uneasiness I had felt before was now something sharper. By the time I reached my house, the sun had started to set. I walked inside, dropped my purse on the kitchen table, and stood there for a long moment without moving. Something was tugging at the edge of my memory. Then I remembered the box. Naomi had given it to me a few weeks before she passed away, a small, sealed storage box that she had asked me to keep safe. I had placed it in the back of my closet and never opened it. Her words came back to me clearly. "Open this only if you truly need to." I walked to the bedroom and pulled down the closet shelf. The box was still there, covered in a thin layer of dust. My hands hesitated for a moment before lifting the lid. Inside was a thick folder. I sat down on the bed and opened it carefully. The first thing I saw was a letter written in Naomi's handwriting. The paper trembled slightly in my hands as I began to read. She had written it during the final weeks before she passed away. The letter was simple and direct. Naomi explains that she had created a small education trust for Bria. She had worked with an attorney to make sure the money could not be misused. Then came the part that made my chest tighten. "If anything ever feels wrong with Wade's care for Bria," she had written, "you have permission to step in." The folder also contained legal documents, instructions, contact information for the attorney who had helped her prepare everything. Naomi had planned for the possibility that things might not go the way she hoped. I sat there for a long time staring at the papers. The next morning, I drove straight to Grant Ellison's office. When he saw the folder, he leaned forward in his chair. "You should have brought this sooner." I didn't know what was inside. He opened the documents carefully and began to read. Minutes passed in silence. Finally, he looked up and said, "Your sister prepared this very carefully." "What does that mean?" "It means she anticipated the possibility that Wade might struggle to provide stable care." Grant tapped one of the pages. "This trust gives you legal standing to advocate for Bria's welfare." I felt my heartbeat quicken. "So what happens now?" "We build a case." He began to list the pieces of evidence: the teacher's email, witness statements from neighbors, financial patterns showing potential misuse of funds. Grant leaned back slightly, then continued, "If everything you described can be documented, the court could review Wade's custodial fitness." I absorbed the words slowly. "You mean he could lose custody?" "It is possible." A few days later, I drove to Middleton again. This time, Wade wasn't home when I arrived. Bria sat on the front steps with a sketchbook resting on her knees. She looked up when she saw me. "Aunt Leora?"
I sat beside her. "What are you drawing today?" She showed me the page, a small house surrounded by tall trees. "That looks nice." She shrugged. "It's just a house." For a moment, we both watched the quiet street. Then she asked something softly. "If Dad moves, do I have to go too?" The question caught me off guard. "What do you mean?" She kept her eyes on the sketchbook. "He says we might live somewhere else." My throat tightened. "Would you want that?" She didn't answer right away. "I like my school." Her voice was small. Behind me, I heard my sister echo.
Chapter 5. Karma Arrives Quietly. I left Grant's office with that sentence still echoing in my head, and for the first time since Naomi died, hope felt heavier than fear. The weeks that followed moved slowly, but every detail mattered. Grant had warned me that cases like this were rarely built on one dramatic moment. They were built on patterns, quiet facts that, once placed side by side, became impossible to ignore. So we gathered everything. Maribel Santos sent records from Lakeview Elementary showing the days Bria arrived without lunch and the repeated attempts the school had made to contact Wade. Her notes described how Bria had grown quieter through the fall, often tired and withdrawn. Terrence Doyle signed a statement describing what he had seen over the previous months: Wade leaving late in the evenings, the silver sedan arriving and leaving, furniture disappearing piece by piece, a child standing too often alone in the doorway. Alyssa helped organize the financial timeline: my transfers, Wade's withdrawals, and the payments that followed. Grant did not need every social media photo from Kendra's accounts, but he saved several screenshots that matched the dates of those transactions. While all this was happening, my daily life still looked normal from the outside. I went to work. I sat in meetings at North Lake Insurance Analytics with spreadsheets open on one screen, while notes from Grant sat quietly on the other. Then, one evening, my phone rang. Wade. I let it ring once before answering. "Hi?" His voice sounded tense. "Grant Ellison contacted me." "That doesn't surprise me." "You really went to a lawyer?" "Yes." A pause followed. "This is insane, Leora. You're making it sound like I'm some kind of criminal because Bria forgot lunch a few times." I leaned against the kitchen counter. "This isn't about lunch." "Then what is it about?" I thought of the empty refrigerator, the moving truck, Bria standing in that doorway. "It's about the fact that she isn't okay." He exhaled sharply. "You have no idea what it's like raising a kid alone." "You're right," I said quietly, "but Naomi and I trusted that you would." Silence filled the line. Then he tried again. "You're doing this because you feel guilty about your sister." That sentence landed cold. "No," I said. "I'm doing this because someone needs to pay attention." I ended the call. 2 days later, Grant told me Wade had hired an attorney, but his tone suggested Wade's side was already worried. "He wants to avoid court," Grant said. "Why?" "Because the evidence doesn't look good for him." The meeting took place the following week in a mediation office near the courthouse square in Madison. Wade looked exhausted when he walked into the room. Kendra was not with him. Grant sat beside me with a stack of folders. Wade's attorney sat across the table. At first, Wade's side tried to minimize everything: temporary financial stress, a misunderstanding with the school, plans to move for stability. Grant listened quietly. Then he began presenting the record: school documentation, witness statements, financial patterns. Each fact stacked calmly on top of the last until the room became very quiet. At one point, Wade rubbed both hands over his face. "This is ridiculous," he muttered. Grant didn't raise his voice. "What's ridiculous," he said calmly, "is that an 11-year-old child ended up being the most responsible person in her own household." That was when Wade stopped arguing. The final shift came when Grant placed Naomi's trust documents on the table.
He explained how Naomi had created a protected education trust for Bria and documented her wish that I intervene if Wade failed to provide stability. Wade's attorney read the documents carefully. Then she asked to speak with him privately. They stepped out for about 10 minutes. When they returned, Wade looked different. The confidence had drained from his face. The settlement discussions moved quickly after that. Bria would move to Madison to live with me. Wade would have limited scheduled visitation, and he would be responsible for financial support. When the meeting ended, I walked outside into the cold afternoon air for a moment, Jones me on the sidewalk. "You did the right thing," he said. I nodded. But inside, I was still thinking about Naomi. Kendra left town within the week. I heard that from Terrence, who heard it from someone else in the neighborhood. Apparently, she transferred to another dealership farther south. Wade moved into a small apartment outside Sun Prairie. Bria came to Madison on a quiet Saturday morning with 2 duffel bags, her sketchbook, and the old house cat complaining loudly in a carrier on the back seat. When we pulled into my driveway, she sat quietly for a moment. "This is your house now, too," I told her. She looked at the front porch, the maple tree in the yard, the pale blue shutters. Inside, I had spent the week turning the spare bedroom into something that felt like it belonged to her. A twin bed with a green quilt, a desk under the window, a white bookshelf I found at a thrift store, curtains with small star patterns because she once told me she liked looking at the night sky. She stepped into the room slowly. "You did this for me?" "Of course." She nodded, then asked quietly, "Can the cat sleep in here?" I laughed. "The cat will sleep wherever he wants." The first few weeks were not perfect. Bria had trouble sleeping some nights. Change sat heavily on her shoulders. That was when I introduced her to Aaron Wallace, a child therapist in Madison who specialized in helping kids adjust to difficult transitions. Aaron never pushed too hard. She just gave Bria space to talk, draw, and slowly let the tension inside her settle. Gradually, things began to stabilize. Bria started sleeping through the night more often. She began bringing home homework with gold stars again. Every morning, I packed her lunch before school. Turkey sandwich, apple slices, pretzels. Some mornings, I slipped a small note inside the lunchbox, just in case she needed a reminder that someone was thinking about her. About 2 months after she moved in, I was making pasta in the kitchen while the cat sat on the windowsill watching the street. Bria sat at the table drawing. When she finished, she slid the paper across the table toward me. I wiped my hands and looked down. The drawing showed a small house with a tree in front. 2 people stood on the porch. A cat sat in the window. The proportions were wrong, but the meaning was clear. "What is this one called?" I asked. She looked at me seriously. "It's my family." For a moment, I couldn't speak. I thought about Naomi in the hospital room years earlier, her hand wrapped tightly around mine. Just make sure she is never forgotten. I reached across the table and squeezed Bria's hand. "She would love this," I said softly. That night, after Bria went to bed, I stood in the hallway watching the steady rise and fall of her breathing. The cat was curled at the foot of her bed, as if he had always belonged there. Justice didn't arrive loudly. There were no dramatic confrontations, no public victories. It came quietly. In a lunchbox packed every morning. In a stable address on a school form. In the peaceful sound of a child finally sleeping without fear. Wade still existed in Bria's life, though now within boundaries that forced him to be accountable. Maybe that was the real consequence of everything. Not humiliation, just the end of being able to pretend nothing was wrong. And me. I kept the promise I made. So, I'm curious about something. If you started noticing small signs like this in your own family, would you trust a little longer and hope things improve, or would you start asking questions sooner? Let me know what you think, and if this story stayed with you, stay here with me. There are always more stories worth telling.